It's good to know the different types of democracy and the various institutions which have been established to protect it. But it's also important to know what people think about democracy. This is important because ultimately it is people who make democracy work. And when they believe in it, they will defend it when it is undermined. Secondly, people's views are likely to change over time. So it's important to know what they think of something at a particular time. So, what is the public opinion on democracy? How do Africans in particular view democracy? Do we like it, or do we despise it as a system of government? By and large, the people of the African continent want to live in countries with democratic and accountable governments. We know this because between 2021 and 2023, the Research and Survey Institute, Afrobarometer, interviewed 55,000 African people in 39 African countries about their views on democracy. The outcome of these interviews revealed that 2 out of every 3 Africans prefer democracy over any other system of government. Not only do a majority of African people prefer democracy, but they also strongly endorse the norms, institutions, and practices associated with it. Here, we're talking about things like freely choosing their leaders through the ballot box, placing constitutional limits on presidential terms, adherence to the rule of law, and human rights protections. In addition, when asked about alternative political systems, African people's overall preference for democracy continued to shine through. For example, 8 out of 10 Africans rejected one-man rule or one-party rule, while 7 out of 10 objected to military rule. Regarding military rule, the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, published a report in 2023 after engaging with 5,000 citizens who had lived through military coups in Africa. The report noted that 55% of Africans living in countries led by military governments, which are also known as military juntas, indicated that they too prefer living in a democracy. Interestingly, those who said that democracy was not their preferred form of government mentioned instances where they felt democracy was failing. By this, they meant that poor leadership inside democratic governments had let them down. This demonstrates that people are more likely to support other non-democratic forms of government when they are disappointed with the performance of their democratically elected governments. In other words, people tolerate authoritarian rule, not necessarily because they prefer it, but because sometimes elected leaders have failed to live up to the citizens' democratic expectations. Given that Africa's population largely consists of young people, with an average age of 19 years old, Afrobarometer observed that young Africans' views of democracy are very similar to their elders. This means that they also support democracy and its core values and institutions. They also reject military rule and other non-democratic forms of government. Perhaps one aspect of modern democracy that citizens are dissatisfied with is the age gap between leaders and ordinary citizens. To put this into context, the gap between the population's average age and the current leader's age in the 17 countries having elections in 2024 was 41 years. So the need for young people in leadership positions is strongly supported by the fact that 71% of the respondents in the UNDP survey agreed that more young people are needed in leadership positions. As we try to understand citizens' views, we need to separate their perceptions of democracy as a system of government from their views of democratic and accountable governance as delivered by elected officials. This enables us to see whether citizens are really frustrated by democracy itself or by the elected officials' failure to live up to their expectations of democratic and accountable government. Although citizens may be disappointed with the delivery of some democratically elected governments, ultimately, and based on evidence, democracy as a system of government is desirable amongst the majority of Africa's people.